Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Accounting Arc. Today's going to be a little different. So today we were actually trying to figure out what are we going to talk about. And of course, AI has been coming up again and again and again. And as we were exploring this, we were kind of going, most of our episodes, we sort of have an idea of a conclusion that we want to reach. And this one, we couldn't come up with one. So again, you're going to see this as a little bit of a different episode. What we're really going to do is explore AI and what really is it that is our role as accountants working with tech, and what are the things that we should think about, for example, risks and cost benefit and whatever else might come into there when we're looking at these types of emerging technologies. So with that, either of you want to kick us off?
I think I'll jump in just to say, as I'm evaluating everything going on with the state of AI and the state of innovation, I feel like there's a lot of noise that people bring into the conversation, because when we're evaluating risk for our organizations and technology that we want to introduce to our organizations, a lot of the tools or maybe the rules of the road have all existed and still exist. So as we're looking at these technologies and things, we should always be kind of falling back to the things we know offer us trust, such as SOC audits and different certifications and frameworks that help us figure things out, and then look at these tools and kind of evaluate them against those. And I think that's getting lost in a lot of the conversations where, because of maybe somewhat of the black box effect of not really understanding these AI tools, and therefore, it's hard to maybe apply some of those principles. But really, for me, I try to fall back on those things that we've always evaluated against or currently evaluate our tools against to try to provide at least some clarity in what is safe and what is not safe.
I think those tools and the frameworks that we use to evaluate them are what we know, right? We're capable of analyzing it and looking at that. I also think that they will evolve and will be forced to evolve as new technology gets created on a weekly basis, right? I mean, we're looking at this in the way that I can describe it in the most layman terms is we now have technology that can create technology. Right? Previously, we had humans creating technology, right? And we had humans programming the software and thinking through the implications of the code, understanding what that looks like, how it works, right? And that black box that Byron alluded to is the fact that we now have a level of software that is capable of creating software. And so it's controlled loosely by humans, but there's a whole piece of it that is this giant black box of, why did it do that? How did it come up with that answer? Why is that in the code now? And where is it coming from? And, as humans, we're skeptical, right? Because we're built for survival. And so there's a lot of skepticism on there saying well, it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, so it's probably good, right? I think.
Probably.
Right, but that's the best we can do because we're humans, right? We can't compute at the rate that computers can compute, and so there's no possible way to have that full-scale understanding, soup to nuts, of everything that is in the technology that we're utilizing now.
Well, that I think comes back to where Byron started with, which the whole purpose of SOC reports, service organization controls reports, this was part of that was to provide that assurance, right? That comfort to the user of, in this case, it'll be the tech service or software as a service, that you can use this and you can feel comfortable that it's doing what it's supposed to do, which was processing integrity, one of the aspects there, and that everything is going to be protected, where we have confidentiality and privacy and information security, all kind of tied into other aspects of that SOC report within the trust principles. So if any of you haven't heard of that, go look up trust principles. Those are the things that the SOC reports are based off of. And in the SOC reports, we're essentially attesting to the fact that whatever service or software it is actually upholds these principles. But I want to flip that a little, and maybe I'll flip it back to Byron, because although, yes, you and I have been on this soapbox of get your SOC reports, it's definitely over 10, it might be over 15 years now that we've been on that soapbox with everybody else. We still don't see a lot. And then when you look at something like DeepSeek or any of the big tech, we don't necessarily always get or can get a SOC report, because sometimes it's really perceived as, well, I'm not handling private, which often is designed as individually identifiable information, right? I'm not handling private information, so I don't need a SOC report.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of general lack of knowledge around SOC, and it may be the complexity of, SOC and the different types of reports that has contributed to it. Because I mean, there was a data breach just recently of one of the popular tax applications that, if you go on their website and you look at their announcement that they're quote unquote SOC certified, which we know isn't a thing, but they have a SOC audit. It's very ambiguous, and it doesn't say what type of SOC audit it was, when it was effective, and a lot of information. And you have a lot of salespeople who say, "Oh yeah, SOC 2, we're SOC 2 certified." They have no idea what that means, or if it's type 1, type 2, these types of things. So I think there's a lot of confusion, both in the vendor side and even in the consumer side, as to what to be looking for. So it almost gives you a little bit of an out from a vendor perspective of, most people don't even understand or ask for it, so we're not going to invest in those types of things.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's why some of the requirements need updates, right? And the definition of private information, I think, needs an update and some clarity as well, because you do have what we have traditionally looked at as private data, right? Like personally identifiable information, financial information, social security numbers, EINs, that type of information has been protected, right? But information like demographic information, right? Part of that. But when you start looking at like wants, interests, the way people interact with the world, you can say you can't tie that back to an individual, but you can tie it back to a user. And it's not that hard to figure out who that user is, right? It's not that hard to like go trace IP addresses and whatnot. And so you end up with this like kind of gray area of what is protected information, what requires this, what doesn't require it, and how do we modify that? Because previously that information probably wasn't that useful, right? Like if you know these things, like what are you going to do with it? There was no way to use that information in a mass way because it was so like nebulous and not really quantifiable. It's qualitative information about people, right? Now you can use it. And there is technology that can take that information and use it to manipulate people and to change the way they're viewing the world and to change the content they're seeing and the way that they interact with the internet and our online lives. And that completely changes the game on what is privacy, right? And I don't know that we'll ever have true privacy again. I honestly don't believe that's a thing that will happen. I think that, there'll be more adjustments and more maybe restrictions on how that data is allowed to be used. But when you're looking cross borders, How do you enforce that?
Well, I want to make sure that we call out because you said there is technology, which makes it sound like it might it might be out there or it's out there. We don't know what it is, but any of the social media, including LinkedIn, right? All of these like Google search, Bing search, all of these things, and then add in any of these AI tools, any of the GPTs, the Gen AIs, any of these that are coming out, all kind of incorporate to some level of degree, especially if you've got public information out there about you, all of this information. So it's not like it's this thing that you have to go look for. It's like all over now. And that's where a lot of this risk is coming from.
Right, it's ubiquitous. And what I mean is like not only is the information there, the ability to use that information is
Right.
there, right? Like we now have models that can compute at a rate that predict what's happening. We have predictive analytics, and those predictive analytics are not just quantifiable data anymore. It's looking at qualitative data and it's looking at how populations interact down to the individual level. And that's the part that gets really scary because you have things like DeepSeek getting released and people, interacting with it. And then you also have all of these countries banning it, right? And, you have the general public being like, well, why would you ban TikTok? Why would you ban DeepSeek? Why is this even a conversation? And, to my earlier point, the conversation is there because we have so many ways to use that data that used to be like irrelevant and extra data points you didn't want to store because it was too expensive and you couldn't compute that fast to figure out what to do with it. Now you can store it relatively cheaply and you can use it in a very like interesting manipulative way. And so, I think in like the first few days of DeepSeek being released, there were bans on it, right? And I think it's really interesting to have something just, I think because it came out of China, right? So like Italy banned it, Taiwan banned it, Texas, the state of Texas banned it. The US Navy, there were most of our federal agencies in the US decided, nope, you can't use that on federal computers, right? You had Australia ban it. There's just all of these countries, states, state departments saying, we don't know if this is safe. They're not saying this is not safe. They're saying we don't know if this is safe, and therefore we are going to wait and see.
Well, and it's really interesting, Liz. You talk about now all these things that maybe 2 years ago we didn't even think about from a privacy perspective, maybe our individual preferences or, the current events going on in our world. The crazy thing is, and maybe not for most of our listeners, but I think for most of us, we existed in a period of time where, frankly, your social security number wasn't even protected. You wrote it down on every check you wrote. You wrote it down on things that you mailed. We use our social security number kind of very loosely, but it was also a time when you couldn't do much if you had somebody else's number. Like there really wasn't a lot of capacity
Right.
to do much with it. And so, in today's world where we think about, oh, maybe my favorite color or these other preferences, that's not private information, like that's out there. The world has changed, and the capacity for that information to be used in a dangerous way may be outside the scope of what you could imagine. But I think we all know that it's within the scope of something that you don't necessarily just want floating out in the world in the hands of people that you don't necessarily trust.
When you
Right.
just use
And
favorite color, at which I often wonder that, like now we use these things as our security questions, right? The backup security questions. So how much of your security question backup answers are actually something I can just go to one of these Gen AI tools and go, what is Donnie's favorite color? And have it end up showing up.
yeah. And I think, there's what I'm talking about is like the massive use and at scale use of information and how does that affect? But then there's also like the micro uses of information, right? So like I created an AI version of Liz for video recording, right? And granted, it's really bad at this point. It's not great, but my intention was to use it to put videos out to my team about policy updates or vision stuff, strategy stuff that we're working on. And I normally record these videos live. So it's me and I talk about stuff and then I edit it and then I send it to the team and I'm like, here's your update because we have a team all over the world. So we have async updates. And I'm like, that would be so much easier if I could just script it because sometimes I go off script or sometimes I don't say things as eloquently as I think I should, right? And I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. So I'm like, okay, if I could make an AI Liz to do this, that'd be great. But then, of course, I started realizing like this AI that I have now trained purposefully with videos of me, with my voice, with information about me exists in the universe, right? And if that company somehow their data gets acquired, somehow their servers fail, so they get hacked, there's so many different ifs and ands that could be Liz Mason on the internet talking about whatever. And granted, they could probably train their own model off of what's available anyways, but that creates a whole level of security concerns if they know what company I'm the CFO for, right? If they know where I have access to financial information. And it makes it really easy to trick people and to do some complex phishing scams. And so our whole team now has safe words. And, we used an AI to basically tell them, hey, go wire money to some random country and just to see what happens, right? And it sounds like you, it satisfies the 2 checks they have to do, right? It's still going to go through an approval process, but at the end of the day, we now have like extra level of safe word security inside the team because of it. And that's like just a very practical thing at this point. And it's not uncommon that that happens. It's no longer the Nigerian prince emailing you for your banking information. It's literally your boss calling you on the phone, actively responding to you in their voice, telling you what to do, and confirming it with a message from their account.
Let me ask you, so one of the things I'm seeing is because the situation you described is you're creating effectively an avatar of yourself on this, what sounds like you probably did it in a cloud app. So what I'm seeing some people say is, well, don't use those because those are a lot more at risk. Use the ones that create your private, like I think Llama creates a private one. DeepSeek, actually, there's a private workstation-based DeepSeek that you could use as well. What do you guys think about that? Does that actually mitigate a lot of that risk of that getting breached or out there?
Personally, I don't think so because the processing isn't happening on your computer. So,
well, some of these systems you can actually put the model on your system, and you can use it in a closed system where the processing does happen in your system. However, I would say I would be willing to bet most users' personal systems are not locked down in a secure method. They probably have a password that's their dog's name with a 1 at the end, and it's not
and their favorite
incredibly
color.
secure. Yeah, and their favorite color. You could probably get their password from their Facebook profile and all their preferences. So, I think it's almost like that conversation that we've had for years over this, like, do I keep servers in the office or do I put my data in the cloud? And generally speaking, if you've vetted the cloud solution and you've reviewed their policies and certifications, they're going to be more secure in those systems than on my individual workstation. So, I appreciate the opportunity to maybe put that on a closed system, but I think it actually creates more exposure, not less.
I'm hearing kind of if I'm going to do closed system, as you're calling it, it really needs to be closed and air gapped, like how we used to talk about. You can use the
Sure.
old Windows 7 or whatever, but it has to not be on a network, on a computer by itself, never connected to the network or anything except what it took to get it down.
There you go. Yeah, and now you're good, and and now you have a system that you can never even unless you're moving data on a USB stick back and forth. I mean, that's a lot of work, to achieve maybe that level of security.
I want to come back to something that we touched on, which was really the the fact that, okay, so we're literally giving all this information away, and especially as we look at it in big tech, we're giving it to big tech. And so my boyfriend actually raised this question. He said, well, what's the difference? I'm giving it to big tech versus if I use DeepSeek, why do I care whether I'm giving it to DeepSeek or not Twitter? What's the one that was banned?
Zuckerberg. Oh,
TikTok.
TikTok.
TikTok, thank you. Yeah, it was like I might as well just use those. Why does it matter?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the reason it matters is those solutions are not governed by US laws, really. Those organizations not only aren't governed by US laws, they're also within the reach of the Chinese government and to use in potentially ways that we don't even know. So while I agree that, there's the privacy concerns with big social media that is in the US with the Zuckerbergs and the Musks of the world, at least that's there's not a government entity that we know of right now that is going to take control of that information and use it for Lord knows what purpose. So for me, I think that's a distinction that matters to me.
Good. Your answer
I think
matches my answer to him.
I'm much more cynical than you. I think that tech companies having my information is just as dangerous as foreign governments. The intentions might be slightly less change my worldview for like the benefit of them. It might be change my worldview for the benefit of consumerism or whoever's paying them. But I go back to like the KGB studies about brainwashing that they did and how easy it is to change somebody's worldview and to influence the way that they make decisions and to change their ability to process real information from fake information. Like that's actually very easy to do to a human. So anyone having that data has that ability over you. And you need to be cognizant of where it's coming from and when it's coming, right? Because I think, unfortunately, we haven't caught up to literacy of understanding information in this digital world, especially when you have biases that are just being exponentially blown up through AI models. And it's very easy. It's very easy to control the population if you have the resources and you have the information. So whether it's the Chinese government or Facebook or whoever that is using that information in manipulative ways, it's still there. It's still being used in a manipulative way, and I'm still a subject of that manipulation. So to me, like data's out there. If they're going to use it in ways to improve my purchases, I'm super happy. Like if you're going to give me targeted advertisements of things that you think I'm probably going to like based off of like everything you know about me, that's amazing. I'm cool with that use of it, right? If you're going to use it to try and make me radicalized or believe in, things that I wouldn't otherwise believe in, or change my political views or my social views, or change my ability to be a kind, ethical human, or change even what I believe is ethical in this world, that I'm not okay with. But that's happening anyways across the board. So,
well, yeah, and I think that the distinction there is you're absolutely right. There is severe lack of literacy with respect to all of this stuff. And
yeah.
so like from what I consider to be a fairly literate person in this space, my distinction is personal to me. For the general illiterate world of understanding with all of these things, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like, both worlds are very dangerous places when you don't really understand what you could be subject to.
But I'm with you too. I worry about a lot of those things. I use private browsing and I disable the things when I can. But I know that that's still just making a tiny dent in what they actually probably have. But I bring, kind of bringing it back to our role. I feel though that part of this is our role as accountants and auditors to really come back and to take that step back from even our personal biases and consciously take that step back and go, okay, wait, where did we get the information? Is this valid? How do we know that we can trust this information? Which ties back into our job as part of the arbiters of truth that we attest, or at least our colleagues attest to, hey, this is what's actually happening. Are the proper disclosures there, whether they're financial disclosures or otherwise? That can also speak to some of Liz's points about, do we know how it came up with this? Well, if we look at like explainable AI and some of these other principles that are coming to try and give transparency to AI, I don't know that any of them is totally successful yet, but we're seeing that trend really come through, which I would equate again to disclosures in our kind of accounting terms. Like if we can at least get people the information that they need to know, this is kind of what's happening, or this is the bent that might be given on something, or the bias that might be provided on something, at least we can make at least an educated guess rather than just like, well, I'm just accepting everything that's coming to me, which I agree. We probably see too many people go, well, it's been told to me. I see it here. It's the truth.
Over and over, right? Well, and it's like you get introduced to a topic 7 times and you start to believe it, right? And so even if it's not true, like your brain recognizes it, and because you're familiar with it, it goes through a different neural pathway, right? And so it's like it goes back to psychology and the way your brains are wired, which is like fascinating. If you ever want to go down that rabbit hole of the internet, just be really careful not to read like what AI is telling you and read actual studies. But I'm going to back up for a second. Put together like a scenario in your head. Like, what could the Chinese government do with this information if you have accountants across this country not aware of what's going on and not using our professional skepticism and thinking through things? Let's say they want to crash the stock market. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we have information about all these accountants that are doing, predictive analytics, that are thinking about, as the CFO of the company, what should happen next, what they should invest in, what they shouldn't invest in. Then you have all of these people, and granted, they're financial experts and traders and wealth managers and whatnot doing the actual buying of these stocks, but they're listening to the earnings reports and they're listening to the outcome that you have from the CFOs, and they're listening to the audit reports, right? So you start influencing what they believe is going to happen in the economy. You start feeding news articles. You start showing them trends, whether or not they're real. You start putting them in front of them and building up a distrust in the system, a distrust in the stock market, a distrust in the economy, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, you have, instead of these bullish reports and predictions, you have CFOs saying, think we're going to meet those because of all these things I'm seeing as a human, right? Plus, on top of that, all these AI models are feeding me the same exact information that my intuition is telling me because of all this information that people have influenced. I'm not questioning it. I'm just going with it because I saw this headline and I saw this other thing, and all of it's coming together to feed this intuition that now is getting confirmed. And that's called confirmation bias. And that comes into play. And all of a sudden you have earnings reports saying, we're not going to meet marks. This is not going to be good. You have people managing wealth, trading, selling that stock. And all of a sudden you have a stock market crash. It's not that hard. All of that information exists today.
I mean, you almost took me back to one of our early episodes of Silicon Valley Bank, right? And it makes you wonder, like, how easily that could have been artificially created, the run on Silicon Bank, following that exact playbook. It's
so the more information out there, the more easily you as an individual and economics can be influenced by outside parties, right? And so that's one like very macro example and like a doomsday. But let's say I own a company. I own a really big company and I have a competitor that I want to take down. Now I'm going to collect all the information about all of their employees. I'm going to collect all the information about everything that they've done, and I'm going to target them on a micro scale and do the exact same thing. I'm going to start feeding them about how horrible their workplace is, get all their people to quit. I'm going to get like everything about the company outlook. I'm going to figure out their investors. I'm going to target their investors, find out the information about that. Like, who owns this company? What are they thinking? What are they investing in? Make them have a bad outlook. And all of a sudden, everything in that company starts falling apart. And I go, oh, hey, I'll buy you for 20 cents on the dollar.
Well, you actually also just built the if we take that up, let's come back to the government level or enemy government in this case level. I mean, that's what they say the risk is, right? That once they're able to gather all this information, now they can target individual people that have key roles, whether it's in government, whether it's in military defense, whether it's in the economic thing, to go, hey, we want you to do this, otherwise we're going to release this information about you. And now we've got the whole blackmail and effectively bullying occurring at an international scale.
Right. Well, and I think that happens, right? Blackmail happens. But I do believe that with the way the AI models are going and with the availability of this information and the way people are interacting online, we will have the information. You don't even need blackmail anymore. You can just convince people of what you want them to do in the background.
Oh, I mean, I can tell you, just going a little bit back as far as what information can you even believe is real? When the LA fires broke out, when I started seeing video of that, I didn't believe any of it was real. I started like just checking many different sources to cross-reference to see if what I was seeing and what I was reading was actually even real. And there's a Instagram account. There's probably a bunch of them, but there's an Instagram account that makes these funny parody videos using AI of like athletes doing their press conference and they're talking and it's all made up. It's 100% parody. It sounds like them. It looks like them. Everything seems authentic. It says parody all over the account. It's a parody account. There's a headline that says parody. The message says parody. I have received those people forwarding those videos to me in Instagram, people that I know, so I'm not going to say their names, and it's saying, "Can you believe so-and-so said this?" And I'm like, it says parody 47 times on that screen. And you forwarded it to me believing that XYZ said that information. It really scares me.
Yeah, it's funny when you read the or see those and then you see their real life versions of people and you're like, oh no, people are much dumber in real life. But also, I think a good message to our future generation of accountants is maintain that skepticism and really lean into figuring out where your gut instincts are coming from and what's influencing that, right? And how you interact in this world. And, making sure, like, one of the things I always do is I read news sources from all over. And I make sure that if I read an article and I'm not familiar with the publisher, I'm verifying facts like you did about the LA fires, right? I'm verifying that that's actually what happened and that it's not just some random headline. And there's a lot of noise in this world. So it's very difficult to do that on a one-by-one basis. And it might just be a headline you see or something else. And then you see it again, right? But start to really question and think through where you're getting your information, how that information is being portrayed to you, because there's also bias in that, then how you interact in the online world individually and as a company or with whatever company you work with.
You raise a good point. One of the things I always check is what's the source, and is there a political or other type of leaning towards of the source of the information. And then I want to bring up the word because we learned it in audit. It's what is it? Corroborating evidence. So it's not just the one piece. It's like what are all the pieces of evidence or things that I can find that actually I'll corroborate and say this is what the actual truth is. So we actually learned some of that in that auditing class.
No doubt. Oof, taking me back, Donny.
Well, you went back to all the way. What did you say? Like social security numbers and everything. I'm like, well, that's pretty far back, right?
It is far back, Y2K era. But yeah, we saw it. It's kind of weird to think back to and just think about the state we are in and just the true lack of privacy that really does exist today.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So any last words? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, any other thoughts on the topic or things that we should be focused on?
Other than go be a hermit, isolate yourself in the woods with no technology. Anything else we think people should do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing is just keep educating yourself. Be literate in these things and help the people around you to be aware. There's so many cases where my daughters share with me stories about things their friends have done or things their friends haven't done. And, I've spent a lot of time making sure that they know what's happening and they understand these things. And unfortunately, there's a lot of parents who are not literate in these things, and therefore their kids are even worse because the habits and the understanding aren't being educated. So I would say just do your best to, become literate, become aware, and, you can now make informed decisions when you are evaluating. Oh, DeepSeek, should I download it? Maybe I should pause a moment and think about this before I do it.
Well said. Well, just going to add that if you want to be one of us that helps actually validate all of this, that is the auditor path in our profession. So definitely come explore that path some more. Take us home, Liz.
Awesome.
Well, I was just going to say you joke about hiding in the woods, but I think with the development of tech and the way things are going, real estate, especially land in the middle of nowhere, is probably one of the best places you can put your money. So
As
you
long
can
as it's
find
not
me
in
on
the
my
fire zone.
644 acres in the middle of the Nevada desert when everything hits the fan.
All right, now that we've convinced everyone to be hermits in one way or another,
Right.
we hope that you will join us. I guess you're going to have to download us and listen to us at another time through a USB drive on another episode of Accounting Art. See y'all later.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.